Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
And did you hear her say yes?
I did not.
Welcome to this debate for the 94th District in the Wisconsin State Assembly. My name is Anthony Chergosky, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to thank the many sponsors and supporters of this debate. These sponsors include WKBT News 8 Now, WXOW News 19, the La Crosse Tribune, Wisconsin Public Radio, WIZM Radio, Midwest Family Lacrosse, Leadership Ethics Lacrosse, the La Crosse Area Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area, and the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Thank you to all of those sponsors for their fantastic support of this debate. The candidates for the 94th Assembly District are Representative Steve Doyle, Kevin Hoyer, and Leroy Brown. Representative Doyle is the candidate of the Democratic Party. Mr. Hoyer is the candidate of the Republican Party, and Mr. Brown is running as an independent candidate. The format for this debate will be as follows. Each candidate will receive 1 minute for an opening statement. Then members of our media panel will take turns asking questions of the candidates. When asked a question, a candidate will have 1 minute and 15 seconds to respond to that question. After that, the other candidates will have 45 seconds for rebuttal and follow-up. We will conclude this debate with closing statements by the candidates. Our media panel today features Mike Biermeister from WXOW News 19, Isabella Hulsizer from WKBT News 8 Now, Bob Heiss from the La Crosse Tribune, and Ezra Wall from Wisconsin Public Radio. The League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area is generously providing assistance with keeping track of speaking time. Thank you, Nora Garland, for providing this assistance today. I asked the candidates to refrain from interrupting one another, and I asked the candidates to respect time limits for their responses. I will reinforce time cues as needed throughout the debate. Through a random draw, we have determined that Mr. Brown will go first, Mr. Hoyer will go second, and Representative Doyle will go third. Mr. Brown, over to you. You have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm a longtime district resident, having called this county my home for over 2 decades, help one another and come together for a common cause. It's one of our region's greatest strengths. I would love to bring this spirit to Madison and would be honored if you give me that chance by voting for me this November.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chergosky. I'd also like to thank Mr. Doyle and Mr. Brown for also running and occupying the seat that we currently have. I am a lifelong resident of West Salem, born and raised on a dairy farm just north of town. My wife and I still operate that farm to this day. I currently sit on the county board, been there for 3 years, where I've had the opportunities to help legislate or help add some teeth into environmental issues along the lines of sustainability. My other obligations I've had is the town board for 4 years. I've also sat for 9 years on a national grassroots ag policy organization where we work nonpartisanly across different lines to make sure that we worked on issues such as environmental issues, sustainability issues, roads, funding, economic issues and rural development. This has also taken me to areas that I've been able to help with in trade from locally to around the world. I look forward to answering all the questions and serving the constituents of the 94th District.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for everybody for participating. A few months ago, the Legislative Reference Bureau did a study and determined that I'm the most bipartisan member of the state assembly. And that's something that I really am proud of, because everything that I have done since I was elected in 2011 has based upon the idea of getting people to work together. And that's why in this election, I have the endorsement of numerous organizations, labor unions, business groups, environmental groups, individual people that I have worked with who found me to be not somebody who simply follows a party line, but looked at the interest of my particular district. In particular, I've worked closely with some of our major local employers like Quick Trip and Matthew, because that is something that really makes a difference for our particular community. So going forward, that is my plan to continue. I want to have my door open to anybody who's interested in issues facing the state legislature, knowing that you can come to me and always expect a fair answer.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. We now turn to our media panel. We have a question for Mr. Brown from Mike Biermeister of WXOW News 19. Mike, over to you.
In one of their most recent reviews, that Wisconsin has had the least active full-time legislature in the nation since the start of the pandemic, finding that other states met 18 times more frequently than their Wisconsin counterpoints. As Wisconsin faces more cases and deaths from COVID-19, how will you rise above partisan politics so Wisconsinites get the care and support they need facing the virus?
Mr. Brown, you have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
All righty, thank you. And yes, it's been pretty frustrating seeing our legislature, sitting on the sidelines as all of this has gone on. I definitely wish they would be more active in trying to respond to help people as they deal with the health and economic consequences of the outbreak. If I were on the legislature, I would be pushing hard to get us into session, to go over bills, at least have that debate, show people that we are concerned for their well-being, again, both in terms of health and in finances, instead of just shouting out when something happens that we don't like, actually come up with things that might help people out.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer, you have 45 seconds for follow-up.
It is concerning how party politics has driven a wedge, not only here locally, but around the country. And that is attributed to the far right and far left. We need to put that aside. We need to work together, and we have to be sure that we are not following the lead of some of our party leaders, but to make sure that we are looking out for the best interests of the 94th district. If elected, that's what I'm going to do. Nonpartisan is all I've ever been, working across party lines to make sure that those that I represent have their voices heard in Madison and not the other way around.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you, is what really everyone is asking for, and the time is now. So I'm ready to go back to work right today.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. We next have a question for Mr. Hoyer from Isabella Hulsizer of WKBT News 8 Now. Isabella, over to you.
Thank you, Anthony. School districts in the 94th have switched to virtual learning or are prepped for virtual learning if needed, but access to the internet can prove to be a challenge for some families living in more rural areas. Some have expressed that the hotspots given to them from school just don't work. What would you do in office to assist these families and to provide the infrastructure that's needed?
Mr. Hoyer.
Well, it certainly is a challenge when we get into the rural areas of the state, not only in La Crosse County as well. And broadband internet is a basic need that I think we all have to look at. Our children depend on that. Our businesses depend on that. And the longer we stay virtual in schools and through this pandemic, our kids are falling behind. They need the physical and social interaction, and teachers are unable to catch them as they fall through the cracks. So we need to work on sufficient resources such as broadband to adequately allow virtual connections. I look to see what we're doing now. How can it be safe to have our YM and YWCAs open and yet not let our schools be open for in-person learning? And that's something that really concerns me as our family units struggle to survive through this. Our small businesses struggle to survive, to be able to keep their employees employed and keep our economy moving. So that's something that I would take very seriously. And working through the National Federation of Independent Businesses, I certainly would step up and make sure that our small businesses, our community, our schools, and our families have the proper needs to be able to cope with the current pandemic and beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle.
Thank you. Generations ago, roads were considered our major form of infrastructure. After that, we had the electrical grid, and now our infrastructure really, you have to look at it as broadband and the internet. If you don't have access to that, you're not able to compete, whether it's in terms of business or getting an education that will give you a well-paying job. That's why I co-sponsored 6 bills in this last session that related to expanding broadband access in rural Wisconsin, because that is something that I've heard from my constituents. It's a message that I took to Madison. Unfortunately, the legislature then decided to go home early and not pass the bills that were sitting there waiting to be considered and voted upon that would expand that broadband access throughout our state. I'm hoping to have a chance to do that again because it's a problem that's not going to go away.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. So for me, I understand, and this is 2020, we are 2 decades into the 21st century. We need internet access to be able to compete and to live daily life, really. What I would do is look at what models are being used in other places to try and expand that access, work either with public or or private means to get more internet into rural areas. For instance, I spoke with a gentleman who spoke very highly of their internet down in Vernon County, and using, I believe it was a cooperative method, and looking at duplicating that across the state, I think would be very beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next, we have a question for Representative Doyle from Bob Heiss of the La Crosse Tribune. Bob, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I recently came from Kenosha, where over there's an active recall, people signing about Governor Evers. And the concern is what was considered by some as a delay to the civil unrest and the rioting that happened in Kenosha. It took a day and a half really for the full enforcement to be able to and of course one night of burning in the city. I wonder what you think of the state's response. Should have been better, and what about other times this happens in Wisconsin cities? Is the state going to be ready to do a better response than Kenosha?
Representative Doyle.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me just say that violence is never an appropriate form of expression, whether you are objecting to somebody getting elected, you're objecting to racial treatment, or whatever the case may be. We learn about militias that are out there that may want to engage in violent and perhaps even fatal type of activities. So I would hope that the governor is ready at any point to take action if necessary. We know that we have an election coming up that is very contentious, and it's likely that we'll see people acting up as a result of whoever wins or doesn't win that election. I hope we're ready at that point. But it's really in the hands of the governor, and I think that he knows now that he's got to be ready at a moment's notice.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. One of the things with the urban unrest that we're seeing around the country, I think of, I believe it was Martin Luther King, and I may be paraphrasing, but that riot is the language of the unheard. And while violence is never the answer to getting these things solved, we should be listening to try and find ways to reduce the stress and the strain in society from whatever cause it may be coming from, to try and alleviate these pressures so people can live more productive, more carefree lives, get to pursue and appreciate and achieve that American dream. And I would work towards policies that help to identify and alleviate stress and strain in our society.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you very much. I want to go back to last question just to make a point that Mr. Doyle had stated. In the last budget, he voted against a $44 million broadband expansion grant. That certainly does not help to get our broadband going here within the state. Now, to this question, what happened in Kenosha? It's unfortunate that we have issues like this, but what is really the crux of the problem is our leadership. Mr. Doyle is right. It is in the hands of our governor. And when our governor comes out within 12 hours of this incident and lays blame at the feet of the police, then to turn around and state publicly that he doesn't have all the information, how can we respond to that? It's unconscionable. Not to mention that when he was asked to bring out the National Guard to help stop some of these violent acts, he didn't give them the proper resources. So we need to work better on leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. We have a question for Mr. Brown from Ezra Wall of Wisconsin Public Radio. Ezra, over to you.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. Mr. Brown, unemployment spiked at around 14% during the shutdown related to COVID-19. And for some, that unemployment spike revealed the tenuous nature of a completely employer-based insurance system. What can be done to ensure that every Wisconsinite has access to affordable health insurance coverage?
Thank you, Ezra. I definitely would like to see us move away from the employer-based the exclusively employer-based model, possibly looking at industry-wide healthcare plans, or even even looking elsewhere to just to make sure people can't be without affordable and quality healthcare, and that, like you said, this epidemic has laid bare the weaknesses in our current system. If we're relying on our employment to give us that health insurance, and then our employment goes away, we're up a creek. So I definitely would like to see us look into other alternatives, try and separate out, give people a little more freedom, and even on the employment front, people don't need to be chained into a job they don't like just for the insurance. I would like to see people feel more comfortable and have the market be more fluid so that they could move from job to job, confident that their quality healthcare will remain with them. So I would look and pursue those sorts of policies if I were elected to the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer.
Health insurance is important. Health care is important. We all need to have that. It's vital to our sustainability of our culture. We need to have choices. Wisconsin has one of the best programs out there. If we relied solely on one system, let's take Medicaid. Medicaid does not pay 100% or even close to what the costs are. Wisconsin's Badger Wisconsin's system that they do have covers that gap. There is no gap. We need to have the ability to make the choices between the insurance that are privatized or public insurance, or what Wisconsin offers. So to me, having the choices, having the ability
per year, it could go a long way to doing two things: lowering the cost of coverage and raising the number of people who are eligible and are being covered by health insurance. For me, it's just unconscionable that we're not doing that, given that the governors and legislatures of both parties in other states are saying, that's our money, we would love to have it back.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Next, we have a question for Mr. Hoyer from Mike Biermeister of WXOW News 19. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Anthony. The American Society of Professional Engineers Wisconsin section gave Wisconsin's overall infrastructure a C, with roads receiving a D- grade. In 2018, roads were a major topic of discussion for this seat. So now that we're here in 2020, are roads in the district better than they were 2 years ago?
Mr. Hoyer.
I drive a grain truck up and down the road every day. No, our roads are terrible. What's really concerning to me is a few years ago, I sat and listened to a representative complain about how our roads are terrible and how the state of Wisconsin was not providing enough funding for local roads. Just recently in the last budget, there was an extra $900 million placed into the transportation budget that was supposed to go directly to local road improvements. Our governor line item vetoed that, took that $90 million, cut that down to $75 million, and then put it into a grant that was open up to everybody to draw from. And that grant, the majority of it all went to Milwaukee or Madison for mass transit. And yet we didn't hear anything out of our representatives on how terrible that was, that money was being pulled out of local road funding to go to Milwaukee or Madison for mass transit. Where's the, I don't get it. I mean, years ago, it was all the legislature's fault for not giving us money. And now when the legislature gives us money, our governor takes it away, and our representative backs the governor on this. We need to have someone that looks out for the 94th district and make sure that the money comes back to the 94th district to go to what it's needed for. Transportation and road funding is one of the top priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle.
Thank you. As former county board chair here in La Crosse, I know very deeply what the problems are with our local road funding, and have been a strong advocate working with local companies again, like Matthew, to advocate for more spending on local roads and on state roads in Wisconsin here. I don't agree with the governor's decision to send the money to mass transit. And I have been working with the Wisconsin Counties Association and others, also the Towns Association, as an attorney for one of our towns here in La Crosse County, to try to rectify that problem. About 20% of our local roads across the state are deemed deficient and need to be repaired, or they're deemed poor and need to be repaired immediately. So that is a top priority that I've had.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. And yes, I definitely agree that our roads could be in better shape. While I definitely commend the crews who are out there putting them in order as best they can. We have a long way to go. A lot of miles still need to be fixed. I definitely would look at seeing how we can shore that up. Speaking to the line item veto, I'm not always a fan of the way that's used at the governor's level. I feel that that it should be really about canceling out a provision, not changing the meaning of a provision. Doesn't matter which party's in power. You shouldn't be using your veto pen to write and rewrite law other than things that are truly objectionable. But yeah, looking at finding alternative funding methods for highways would be a big priority of mine.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next, we have a question for Representative Doyle from Isabella Hulsizer of WKBT News 8 Now. Isabella, over to you.
Thank you. Do you support the governor's latest emergency order to limit capacity in businesses to 25%? And what recommendations would you give to struggling businesses right now?
So I support the efforts that the governor has been making to try to deal with the pandemic. The problem that I have is that Wisconsin does not have a plan. When I say that, what I mean is we don't have a plan because the governor unilaterally cannot create a plan. You're at least one that's going to be followed by the citizens of our state and enforced. What we really need is the legislature to go back into session, and we need to sit down with the governor and work out a plan. That it's unfortunate that the legislature has basically played ostrich and sticking our head in the sand. That just can't go on.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. I agree with the spirit of the law. I do question whether on its legality, the continued extensions, and definitely agree that the legislature should step in to provide the ultimate answer here. What we've seen from the legislators so far has been an abdication of their responsibility to the people of Wisconsin, and it is shameful. We should see them. They should be in session. They should be coming up with solutions, working with the governor so that we aren't put in these precarious positions. At the same time, we need to be looking out for our business owners and our unemployed who are facing such hardships economically that they have to resort to court actions to try and stop this.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer.
Definitely need to take this virus seriously. It is something that we haven't dealt with, or a pandemic of this nature for 100 years. What do I tell the small businesses? That's a tough one because they need to survive. They need to be able to make the decisions that is good for them, their families, and their business. These business owners need to have support to be able to stay open during and even after the pandemic, so our employees have a place to go back to. None of our business owners want to put their families, their jobs, their lives in jeopardy. So all businesses are essential. And I tell the small businesses that they need to get a hold of their representatives and tell them what they really think about this. And remember that a restaurant or tavern in West Salem does not have the same environment as one in West Allis would have.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Next, I have a question submitted by the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area, and I'd like to give each of you 1 minute and 15 seconds to respond to this question, starting with Mr. Brown. The question from the League of Women Voters reads as follows. The majority of voters in Wisconsin favor a fair method of redistricting, about 70%. 54 counties have passed a resolution and 17 have passed a referendum supporting fair maps. 11 counties have a referendum on the November ballot. With this overwhelming support, have you signed or will you sign the following Fair Maps pledge? It reads, quote, as a candidate for the Wisconsin State Assembly, I support an independent process to draw legislative district maps. I pledge to support fair maps legislation to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin and will refuse to vote for any gerrymandering scheme. If elected, I will fight to ensure the next redistricting process results in fair maps for the next decade. Mr. Brown first, then Mr. Hoyer. Mr. Brown, do you or would you support that pledge?
Yes, wholeheartedly, yes. The issue of gerrymandering is an issue that is very, very dear to my campaign. It is part of the impetus for it. Truly, the hoarding of districts and votes by a party to disenfranchise the other is wholly unfair and undemocratic, and has no place in the operations of our republic. I would work towards creating that independent body or otherwise making institutional change that allowed for our districts to be representative of the people who live there. And also, another thing to consider is that our districts, even when they're competitive, we're still, potentially disenfranchising 50% of the vote. So another thing I would be interested in looking at would be finding an institutional means of ensuring their voices are continue to be heard even after election day. If they made it onto the ballot and they get a certain amount of votes while they don't get a seat and they don't get to speak on the floor, they may still be deserving of some manner of role in the shaping of life in our state.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you. I had to take a drink of water from my well here on the farm to make sure I could get this out. Redistricting. Well, we all deserve to have a realistic district to represent us. As far as signing any sort of agreement, every policy or everything that comes up wants you to sign something. No new taxes. On partisan or bipartisan committee is our current bipartisan nonpartisan elections commission. How effective is that in getting its work done? They can't even come up with an idea there because it's always split. And even if the governor puts something out there, it's always going to be partisan. And furthermore, the push behind this seems to be coming from the National Democratic Redistricting PAC, which, by the way, $1,000 was given to my opponent, Steve Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle.
And yes, I'm very proud that I merited their support, because that is something that in a heartbeat I would sign that pledge. And not only would I sign that pledge, but I in fact have co-sponsored the redistricting bills every time that they have come up in the legislature. I've never been given the opportunity to vote on them because they have not been brought up for vote. But here's the problem with gerrymandered districts is when you have districts where it's the voters are packed in there in a lopsided fashion, what it does is it creates a lack of communication between the parties. So if I am a Democrat from Milwaukee, I know that I have to be as democratic as possible because I'm going to be challenged in a primary if I'm not as extreme as I can get. If I am a Republican in suburban Milwaukee area, I need to be as conservative and as extreme as possible, or I may find a primary challenge. What that means is the Democrats and Republicans not only don't communicate with each other, they don't even speak the same language because there is a disincentive for cooperating with the other party. I, in fact, am the only Democrat in the entire state assembly that represents a Republican-leaning district. And I have won in the last several elections by pretty comfortable margins because the people of my district recognize that I do speak the language of both the Democrats and the Republicans.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Next, we have a question for Mr. Brown from Bob Heiss of the La Crosse Tribune. Bob, over to you.
I'd like to get back to education a minute and talk about the largest districts in La Crosse are all virtual. And how long can this go? I mean, what are your feelings about the schools at least offering hybrid and in person, knowing that a lot of students may fall behind? And the other part of the question is, if schools continue to be virtual for perhaps the whole year, are you going to start questioning funding?
Mr. Brown.
All righty, and thank you. And for me personally, I wouldn't bring the question of funding into this. I believe that our districts are probably scraping by as it is with reduced revenues and reduced activities going on, that they need all the help they can get. I would also be interested in looking at ways of expanding district funding so they're not so dependent on the property tax. But to get to your point of the virtual learning environment, I definitely want to see our students succeed, and I just don't want to see them become carriers for something and infect others unintentionally. If that means smaller class sizes, trying to establish classrooms outside of the school where smaller groups can be held, what have you. We may need to think outside the box on this one, but just to keep people safe, keep people distance, and make sure they're getting the best education they can, given the circumstances of this environment.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer.
It is a concern to a lot of parents. The doors I've been knocking on the last month and a half, when I'm asking the question about education, the vast majority would like to see their kids go back to learning in school versus virtually. Again, it falls back to children learn better by doing. They become better citizens by being socially active with others. The other thing we really need to be looking at here is school choice, making sure that our parents have the ability to make the choices that they need to make for their children, to put them in a school that makes the best sense for them, and to be able to help the funding source of that to be able to help them achieve that. That just raises competition for the education system, and we'll have better citizens down the road because of that.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle.
I think the decision of whether to have virtual schools or face-to-face school really needs to be a local one, because as was mentioned earlier, things are different around the state, and the right decision.
To Ezra Wall of WPR. Ezra has a question for Mr. Hoyer. Ezra, over to you.
Mr. Hoyer, ending partisan gridlock is a popular election year promise, regardless of party. And since my Midwestern parents always taught me it takes two to argue, I'm going to ask you, what does your party need to do to better bring a bipartisan spirit of cooperation to the state assembly?
I look at it more of what do I bring to this? I've been nonpartisan, representing people pretty much my whole entire adult life, starting back in 2003 when I served on both state and national policy boards. Bring that right back to our county board and township board. It takes the right person in the seat to be able to carry on that conversation with the rest of the members within the assembly to get something done positively. Grassroots. My campaign is grassroots, and it's nonpartisan. That's how we're going to get something done. Set aside party politics and make sure that we look at the positives and everything we have, and move forward. It's not about asking our leaders, how should we vote? A true leader does not go to his governor or his party leader and says, this is a tough vote. AB Bill 76 was a prime example of Representative Doyle switching his vote bipartisanly. He voted for it once to turn around, and when it came back in front of the legislature to override the governor's veto, he admitted he didn't know how to vote. So he went to the governor to ask how he should vote, and his party leader how he should vote. That's not bucking your party. That's voting by party politics.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle.
Thank you. I think bipartisanship really involves working together with everyone and making sure that people understand where you're coming from and you listening to where they're coming from. I would note that in his 3 years on the county board, Mr. Hoyer has only made one motion on the floor of the county board, and that motion failed. And not only did it fail, he was the only one who voted for it. So every one of his colleagues said, we don't agree with what you're doing here. You didn't do your homework. You didn't try to convince people that you were doing the right thing. With regard to AB 76, I voted against my party the first go around. And then when I found that the governor had a proposal to accomplish the same thing without the need for a veto override, which by the way, did get accomplished. It was the CNA bill. It made sense to say, let's not override the governor's veto. Let's accomplish it a different, less confrontational way.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. And it's interesting to hear when my opponents in this race or competitors in this race will describe their nonpartisan background in such a partisan framework. I ran independent because I couldn't, in good conscience, tie myself to either one of the two right now. I would like to see, though, I would like to work with members of both parties to achieve what we can in that if it weren't for the letter next to the name of the sponsor would be, common sense, no non-issue of getting them passed. And that would be what my focus would be in Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We have a question for Representative Doyle from Mike Biermeister of WXOW News 19. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Anthony. We continue to see issues with the unemployment system, as just this week we had viewers calling our station saying that they still have not been approved for unemployment, or they're having other problems just getting through. How will you use your legislative power to demand action from the Department of Workforce Development?
Actually, I already have been working on that issue, and those of you who listen to the radio know that earlier this summer I was running ads on multiple radio stations, encouraging people to contact my office if they were having a difficult time getting their unemployment compensation or their small business loan and so forth. My office has helped over 200 people to get those things and to get their life back on track in that regard. I supported the governor's move to replace the head of that agency because it just wasn't working out the way that it should have. I also volunteered my Madison staff to go over to that agency and put in time.
That for each and every person who came in and said, we've been having this difficulty trying to get this, especially now with everything going on. People need to have a source of income. If their job shut down because of the outbreak, we can't in good conscience keep them from that. I do suspect part of the issue is systemic in the sense that there could be like old software and things that just makes it untenable to process that large amount of requests. I know we were seeing similar things out of other states where they didn't have the infrastructure or the computer systems to get everything that they needed taken care of. And looking at making those investments to strengthen the system going forward would be a high priority of mine as well.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyer.
No one should have to wait this long for their unemployment or their benefits. And I have heard that it is an issue with software and hardware. That should not have happened. that's a definite lack of leadership, failure to plan, even though it's hard to plan for a pandemic. We need to take a hard look at moving resources to the right direction to make sure that those who are suffering through this pandemic get paid and paid quickly. And as far as the county board thing, I asked for a transparency amendment to a resolution that gave up power of the county board to our administrator. And Mr. Doyle was the first to stand up and say, "Oh, we don't need that because I trust our leadership. They'll do the right thing for us," only to find out later that they failed to communicate with our healthcare professionals during this COVID crisis and had to scrap COVID-19 and start all over again. That's why I added that amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Next, we have a question for Mr. Brown from Isabella Halsizer of WKBT News 8 Now. Isabella?
Thank you. What is the biggest agriculture issue you find farmers in the district are dealing with, and how would you prioritize that if elected to office?
Thank you. And right now, I would definitely say it's the market that they're all facing. Especially, I know a lot of our dairy farmers. I'm sure Kevin will have something to say on this in a moment, but a lot of our dairy farmers have been on hard times and struggling to make ends meet in the current environment. Working with them and our other agricultural sectors to make sure they have the support. I spoke with an agricultural group recently that expressed the phosphorus limits and the runoff issues are breaking the bank for some of them. And looking at ways, while we definitely need to rein in phosphorus, I know in the village of West Salem we're doing our part. But looking at the state level, like shoring up and helping these smaller operations who don't have the resources of the larger endeavors, helping them to meet the same standards as far as phosphorus and other chemical runoffs, and making sure that they're able to do business and benefit from the scale that can be brought to bear on those issues. I feel that we don't need to be an environment where only the big dogs survive in agriculture. There has to be room for smaller fish in that pond so that they can grow and serve their customers, serve their communities as best as they can.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyer.
Well, as you all know, agriculture is near and dear to me. Even the water from my well is clean enough for me to drink. One of the biggest issues facing farmers, just like any other business, is just the evolution of how the industry is moving, making sure our markets are open and fair. The recent passage of USMCA by our president did an awesome job of opening that up. Other regulations that come down on us need to be sustainable. We need to look at this to make sure that farmers are the best stewards of their environment. Clean drinking water is important. Clean air is important. Conservation practices to achieve that is important. Farmers are the front line to environmental issues, and they need to be embraced and helped and nurtured along to make sure that consumers also realize this. And it's bigger than agriculture in the world that we live in.
Thank you. Representative Doyle.
I think that we need to encourage and promote more local producers, more Westby creameries, more Craig's Meats, those types of entities. I think that we can also help individual farmers with grants for farmer planning and for cash flow and so forth. But, in this last session, I really devoted a lot of time to
that you would like, as soon as you meet, that you'd like to make see of our priorities, or you would debate and really do something about. Or what maybe these are things you're hearing from voters, but what would you want to hit the ground running with?
Mr. Hoyer, if you got that, go ahead.
I'm not sure if I heard all of that, but some of the issues I think we really need to move forward on is groundwater safety. I've been an advocate for groundwater and environmental safety for years with my work on the American Soybean Association, also sitting on a sustainability board called Field Rise, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin. It has been right key with everything I'm looking for. As a certified crop advisor, I have to sign an affidavit saying that I uphold the highest environmental standards possible to hold those credentials. So one of the first things that I really would like to see the legislature to come forward on is to make sure that our environment is safely cared for and sustainably cared for. Secondly, would be just to make sure that as we come out of this COVID crisis, our small businesses are looked out for, to make sure that they have the resources, the tools, the support that they can move forward to keep their employees employed, and that our economy can get rebooted and started again, and we don't go through a deep recession. And lastly, just offering all the support that we can to our law enforcement to make sure that they can keep us safe in our homes. It's very important that we have that safety we all can fall back on.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle.
Right today, we should be in session dealing with the issues that relate to the pandemic. So we need to get people back to work. We need to help our small businesses. And by the way, I introduced a small business reopening plan even before the governor did. I think I was the first elected official in the state to put forward a plan in that regard. But after we get a handle on the economy and the health crisis, then I think when we're in session starting in January, we need to focus on what I would consider the top three priorities: healthcare, education, and transportation. We need to look at those as investments, not simply as expenditures, and we need to work on all three of those topics.
Thank you, Representative Doyle. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. And definitely the immediate topic to be addressed is the COVID outbreak and how best to respond to that and to help families and businesses make ends meet in the meantime. Following that, once we're on to regular business, definitely looking at places to make investments, to make people's lives easier, to take advantage of the fact that we are, the United States of America. We are, Wisconsin, part of that club, fortunate enough to have access to all of the benefits and resources that we do, trying to invest education, healthcare, multiple different areas, just to try and boost us up and make a better world for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next, we have a question for Representative Doyle from Ezra Wall of Wisconsin Public Radio. Ezra?
Thanks. According to 2019 Census.gov estimates, La Crosse County is about 91% white, a disparity that area minorities are keenly aware of. If reelected, what will you do to amplify and center the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our district?
I think that's an area that has gotten less attention than it really needs. And so I would look at a couple different things. First of all, I commend what's going on in the city of La Crosse with regard to our local police department, saying that, here's what we're trying to do to be more culturally sensitive and creating a community dialogue. I think that's really important to make sure that people understand that we look at everyone the same and people aren't being singled out for better or worse treatment. But beyond that, we also have to have greater sensitivity, really just in opportunities, whether it's for jobs or for promotions or for education. And I think the state can play a role in that. I would encourage, and I know people don't like to always talk about create a committee for this or a task force for that, but I've had great success being a member of speakers task forces with our bipartisan approach to dealing with really tricky and knotty issues. And I think that getting together the right group of people, some from each party, to talk about the legislative approach to
We definitely, we can't be in an environment of others constantly. It's got to be us. It's all of us. We need to work together to make sure that we appreciate different cultures and different perspectives on things.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyer.
I think Mr. Brown said it pretty good there. It's about us. It's not about me or you, but about us. We live in a very diverse area, not only environmentally, but culturally too. And it's important that everyone is included and everyone's voice is heard. We hear about systemic racism or systemic this, systemic that. And to me, systemic starts from the root. And we have to take measures to go back to the root of what's happening. None of us are born with the preconceived notions that we have, but we're taught that. So we need to go back, look at our family units, look at our educational units, and make sure that the proper respect and the proper responsibility is being encouraged, so we can move forward and we all can get along together and all live in harmony and treat each other as if we wanted to be treated. And that's very important, not only here in the 94th, but around the country.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. And thank you to the members of our media panel for their questions today. We will now transition to closing statements by the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute for their closing statement. Mr. Brown, you can go first. You have 1 minute.
All righty. Well, thank you first to the host and panelists of today's debate, and to all of you at home working to stay informed. To my fellow candidates, it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the third. I'm running for assembly because I enjoy problem solving, and Wisconsin, like the rest of the country and the rest of the world, faces its fair share of problems to solve. Thankfully, I believe we here in the Coulee region are well equipped to take on the challenges we face. I'm running as an independent because I have lost faith that the two parties can say the same. Too much of our discourse is locked into the languages of us versus them, people chained to their teams, red and blue. We are free to be so much more than this. We are so much more than this. If you feel this way, I would encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and give independence a chance by voting for me this November.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Hoyer, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you, and thank you to the panelists for the awesome questions. It was a great opportunity to be able to answer those and listen to the other questions. In closing, we need to have a representative that represents us to Madison, grassroots, nonpartisan. The best way of doing that is picking a person who has that experience that dates back to the early 2000s, where grassroots and nonpartisan is anything and everything that I have known. Party politics needs to get out of the way. We also have to ensure that party money is not in play here. It's hard to be bipartisan or be a leader when your party drops in over $350,000 into your campaign fund and then expects you to be nonpartisan or to represent the people. Why is money from California, New York, and even the governor from Illinois, who kicked in $2.5 million to the Wisconsin Democrat Party, coming into the 94th district? We don't need Bears fans to help pick the next leader, the next representative for the 94th district.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Representative Doyle, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you. I'm really proud to be what I think Republicans consider to be the go-to man. When my colleagues in the Republican Party are looking for a Democrat to co-sponsor bills, it seems like I'm almost always the first one that they come to. When Republican Speaker Robin Vos is looking for people to help lead the Speaker's task forces on difficult issues, whether it is kids in foster care and the child welfare system, or suicide prevention, or adoption, he comes to me. That tells me that the Republicans respect my position as somebody who listens to both sides and doesn't follow a particular party line. When issues come up, I don't look at them as a Democrat or Republican. I look at those issues as what's best for my particular district and what's best for the state of Wisconsin in terms of moving us forward. And I think that's why you see that I've been endorsed by liberals, conservatives, business groups, labor groups, and so forth, because they know where I come from and they know where I'm going.
For now, I'm Anthony Chergosky from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. Thank you for watching today's debate, and remember to cast your vote.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.